Y'all, welcome back to Kentucky Fried Wargaming, where two guys who aren't qualified to talk about anything decide to talk about a game with hard math and chance. I'm Joe.
And I'm John.
And on this episode of the podcast, we're trying to get it out a little early because it's topical. And to be honest, we're on a time limit before it is no longer a reasonable thing to talk about in the way we want to. Out there in viewer land, you probably heard some talk lately about codexes and how those are coming soon, and how you're going to have to pay for them outside of the app and then put in codes and stuff. There's been a lot of chatter about it in the community. And we don't want to talk about purely that because I don't know if I have enough thoughts around it to cover a whole podcast, to be honest, John. It's hard to discuss in the current hobby climate.
There'd be spicy waters out there.
God, everyone's so mad. People are weirdly angry about defending this company, and people so mad about the change. It's nuts. So we're not going to talk about that on its own, but it did get us speaking as we were discussing whether we were going to talk about that topic or not. Just the idea of the codexes themselves, because they got brought up in the conversation, and how those are coming soon. And they're going to be the first ones of a new edition. And looking at the comment sections of like some of the videos we've put out, it seems like there's a lot of new folks to 10th, well, like to not only 10th, but 40K in the comment section, which makes us think that there's probably a fair number of viewers who might not have seen a codex or know what that is. So we thought it might be wise to talk about codexes and roughly what they are, but also how we want to see them change in this new edition of Warhammer. Because I'm sure they're going to change in some ways, but worth talking about what we want. And these are less spicy waters.
It's significantly less spicy waters. Like we'll probably say some stuff that people will balk at, but like to TLDR, if you don't want to watch a whole video, is like, I don't know. We kind of want them to get better, but like we also want them to be cheaper.
Mm-hmm. Their existence serves a purpose. They're expensive. We want improvements.
Yeah.
It's really mild, comparatively.
All right. Episode over.
Thanks. Done recording. We're just going to talk about hobby time and then like some other words after that. So, Seth, play the music. John, what have you been up to?
Well, last night we played a game of Warhammer.
We did.
I played Imperial Guard.
You did.
And you played Orcs.
I did.
And you clapped my cheeks.
I did.
Like I was on spring break.
Uh-huh. You're welcome for my service.
I think like we had a long discussion about it after the game. Like a lot of it came down to like weird list building choices I made, and also just the mission was weird. But it's a very good and fun game. Officially, the kill rig is a tough as nails unit. It actually has a unique enhancement, and that is it does not die against guard tanks. Which is surprising.
I spent the 1 CP stratagem invulnerable, and it's now invulnerable to all damage, foreign and domestic.
It's fantastic.
I really liked it. The Hunter rig will forever live in infamy. But I think we learned a lot from that game.
Yeah, as we've played more 10th edition, we've kind of learned more about what good lists and what bad lists look like in our like meta and setting, where we're not like going to skew lists or going to tournaments, so we're playing like a couple of steps below, but still at a higher level than like taking super fluffy lists. And we've kind of determined where like that middle ground is through a lot of this play, and it's been eye-opening about some problems that the codexes have, which we'll get into later. But because of a lot of other stuff, I didn't get a lot of painting done. I got a lot of like priming and getting stuff ready. Mm-hmm. Worked on some AOS models. I'm gonna have these Corvus Cabal ready for whenever AOS time comes back around. Gonna start getting back into the Slaves of Darkness. Ayo.
Hey, nice.
Yeah, it's really enjoyable to have a faction that like I painted and played for a bit, and then I stepped away from, and I am still looking at them and going, "Wow, I can't wait to play them again."
Yeah.
Like I can't wait till we come back around to this fantasy game, and I can play these edgy boys, evil knights.
Yeah, it's nice to like do a bunch of hobbying and then say, I'll be back for this. And mean it. Like
Yep.
it's really a good feeling to know you found a long-term faction rather than just some like fleeting fancy.
It's also a very different project than painting Gene Stealer Cult and Guard, which is just a lot of dude.
Yeah.
So much dude.
And lightly armored dude in those cases.
Yes.
Like in Slaves to Darkness, all heavily armored, everybody rocket plate mail, and like very, very few guys on the field to play around with.
Yeah. I also really enjoy the Warcry warbands that can go into Slaves to Darkness. Like the Corvus Cabal are just very, very cool and fun models. And I like that the design of the book is that I don't necessarily want to spam like 3 units of them. I want to bring like a unit that is super cool and fun and unique.
Yeah,
So,
I think that's pretty cool.
Big fan. What about you? What have you been working on? I know the answer, but I want you to tell the listeners.
A lot. I have been working on a test game for my wife. I've talked about it in the past couple episodes. Like she is wanting to try 40K for the first time. Well, like really try it hard for the first time. And she wants to play Night Lords. So I have 3D printed a test mini. It's actually Talos from the Night Lords Omnibus. He's like the main character out there for people who have read the book. And I got him printed, and I have been working on a test scheme for her. Trying to keep in mind like where she's at on her hobby journey so that it's not too complicated or like too burdened with time-consuming techniques, but also still above like base coat wash sort of steps. And it took a little bit of trial and error back and forth, but eventually I think I found something that works pretty nicely. And Talos is now totally painted. And she absolutely loves it. So now, really the only question is how she wants to base the army, and then I will put that on the Talos Mini, and that will be like the stand-in test model for what this thing's going to look like in the end as an army product. And then I just got to 3D print her minis and have her try to paint it herself, but on, full units. I don't paint very much chaos stuff, so it was very different for me, but it was fun.
It is a very different experience. There's a lot of trim generally.
There was so much. And also the first metal color I was using, I tried to use like Gehenna Gold, I think, from Games Workshop, and it was terrible.
Bad call.
It was awful. It was so awful.
Bad gold.
I was mad trying to use it on one mini. Like I imagined my wife trying to use it for a whole army, and it was going to be terrible.
I think that for trim, a really good gold is any of the shade of gold you want from scale 75s, like alchemy, like metal alchemy line, really good. Like if you're looking for a super good gold, I really enjoy it. It flows really nice and it goes on pretty smooth. And when you're doing that trim, you really don't want to have to do it a couple of times. Like you want to be able to go, whoop, and you want to look the depth that you want it to.
Yeah, the way I got around it is I did a color blend of contrast paints mixed with Vallejo metal color, because those metal colors are really good. And in a couple of ratio tests, eventually I found something that is sort of like a bronzy, desaturated gold, like rose gold sort of look, because she doesn't want just like regular gold, because the Night Lords are like scavengers and their armor's old. So like just bright gold would look weird for what she wants. But eventually I ended up with a desaturated gold or rose gold or like bronzy undertones with some like flesh tones plus metal color, and then mixing it up in various ratios. And that went on smoothly in one coat. So like, nailed it. Huge fan. And then in between all of those painting sessions, because when you're trying to like test a scheme, it takes longer because you're really like stopping and thinking at every step. I've been printing orcs non-stop. digitally kit bashing orcs, setting up STLs, printing them, waking up early in the morning before work to swap out prints. Like it's not
Absolute
efficient.
mad lad.
It just God, so many orcs. I printed like almost an entire orc army in 3 or 4 days. Because on like Tuesday of this week, Monday or Tuesday, we came up with this thing that like, oh, people are coming over to get stuff from my house. What if we invited our buddy Lucas over? Who's like our biggest fan and a delightful person to play with. And he had to miss our big game day because he got sick. Like, okay, Lucas is coming over this weekend. I want to give Lucas a good game. We got to give Lucas a good game. And I thought the thing he would have the most fun with is fighting against orcs rather than like my Eldar or my Custodes, because that it'd be his first game's intent, that would be a rough introduction. So, for the sake of Lucas, I decided to print a whole damn orc army so that he could have a hell of a time to fight against. And I was successful, except for one mini. I got my army list printed, entirely done, glued on bases, ready to play, except for one freaking mega knob. And to be honest, I wish I failed bigger. The fact that I just failed by one is insulting. Like, that's really... that's
how
worse.
I felt last night trying to kill your kill rig when I had 2 wounds left on it.
That was insulting. God.
With like 3 units.
Yeah.
It's insulting.
Sorry. You need to just drink more creatine. I don't know what you want from me. Like,
yeah.
Weedy Guardsman?
Pour creatine. No. We gotta pour creatine into the gas tank of a Lehman Res.
By orc logic, that's a big thinky what's it. Like, that would actually work. See? You're getting there. You could be weird, too. I did fight John. We had a hell of a game. Where I really just like punched the hell out of him after a big shooting phase. That was glorious. Glorious. Orcs, real fun. Like, first game, they were my first games of 10th with orcs, and orcs felt cool. They've got a couple of issues. We'll talk about it later in the show because it kind of got some conversation started. But overall, I felt like they played exactly how I picture orcs to play, which was really cool.
Yeah.
And I also played a game before that. I played Seth, who is one of the editors for the show. He was also on the Drukhari faction focus from 9th edition for the longtime viewers. I played Seth. He had his NIDS. And wowie zowie, it did not go long. A combination of factors of like terrain plus deployment type and the amount of models Seth had to try to fit in this deployment area meant that stuff got deployed like on the line, and I got to go first on turn 1, and I called a wah immediately. Like, all right, start of game, whoa, and then immediately charged his line before he even got to move. And wow, orcs punch good. Orcs punched good. And that we then kept playing because, you know, if he had a really good clap back, still a game. Unfortunately, his clap back did not do, and both the Hunter rig and the Beast Boss survived, and all of the Orc boys were untouched. It was Orc win. It was an Orc win.
Orc win. Yeah. The Orcs will lose next time, though. The sun will set on the Orc Empire.
Don't you say this to me, John. You are doomed.
Throwing the gauntlet down.
I did throw down a gauntlet. It's made out of the remnants of your tanks.
Yeah, that's fine. We ordered more from our Hive Worlds. We'll be fine.
You ordered a Costco bulk discount of battle cannons?
Yeah, I need a pallet of dude.
I need 3 pallets of guardsmen. Stat. Where do you want them? Don't matter. Just throw them up front.
Yes.
Yeah, it was really fun. I really liked orcs. I think I'm going to just immediately start painting orcs. Like when we are done recording tonight, probably. Just start painting orcs. I think my list has some kinks that I can improve on if I want to.
Like, you talking like like ropes, like knife play, like
We are
kind of what?
we are beast snagga boys. The snagga implies there's some ropes involved, John.
Yeah. All right. Cool. I'm trying to figure out how kinky these orcs are. Like, are they into like bad dragon? Like, what's going on?
Although the snagga involves like hooks and stuff, so that's like we're in needle territory.
That's some cool things. Got some dungeon going on.
Yeah, you're in needle territory. You're getting a little down the rabbit hole with some beast snagga boys. Um, uh, John, you can't chuckle now. We're too late into the bit. Yeah, it was fun. I think I'm going to start with painting Gretchen and then just like work my way up to like work on that kill rig because it
Hold up. You're like, oh man, I'm super jazzed to paint orcs. I'm gonna paint these little goblin dudes.
Because I think they're going to go in every list. So if I'm going to paint something that I know I'm going to see on the table a lot, it's going to be the little Gretchen. Don't get me wrong. They did nothing cool. Like, they didn't blow anything up, so they don't count. But, like, the rest of the force ripped and teared. Literally Rip and Tear was playing. Nickelback came on. We did the wah. Tore all the tanks in half. Guys spilling everywhere. Choppas cutting. Chainsaws. Explosions. Plasma guns. They won. But, like, the Gretchen scored a bajillion points or whatever. Like, it's fine. But it doesn't count. But I think, tactically, I should probably paint them Gretchen and bring them in every game. Because they scored a bajillion points or whatever uncool thing they did back there. And you killed them. You did. You killed one of my units of Gretchen, you bastard.
I did send, like, the Special Forces equivalent of Guardsmen to go kill, like, 10 Gretchen.
Not one unit. You sent 2 units of Special Forces. Deep striking, hot shot, last gun, plasma gun toting special cops to go kill 10 Gretchen.
In my defense, I had the behind enemy line secondary. That's the real reason they were there. It just happened they were also going to 0 Dark 30 those fucking Gretchen.
It was hateful, and I felt it. That's what I'm saying. Much like our thoughts on codexes. Play the music. John, it was a the bait and switch. We actually don't have a whole lot of hate for it, but like codexes, what are they?
So codexes, right? The best way to describe them is that they are just books that you buy full of lore, rules for an edition. You normally buy 1 per edition, unless you're super unlucky and you're like Lumineth Realm Lords or like Sisters of Battle or something.
Yeah, then that's rough.
World Eaters. But like generally, they're the one-time purchase every 3 years for your army. They're normally, at least in the US, about $60 a pop. And they come with all of the army rules you need before supplements, to be completely honest. But generally, you can kind of avoid supplements unless they're a super good supplement and just run with the Codex. And in 10th edition, they're going to have some changes. We don't know fully what those changes are going to be like yet. But we're going to mostly talk about what we want to see happen with this new line of codexes. And we'll probably drop some like historical things what have happened before that we want to see keep happening or not happen.
Yeah, because I think that's the real key there is like it is the one-stop primer for your army. Like if you are just getting into Warhammer, especially if you're a new player and you know bubkiss about the fluff of these things, like the Codex is the one-stop shop for everything you're going to need to know to get to grips with them. It's going to tell you like the history of that force, where they fit in the setting, the fluff of each individual unit in there, some of the named factions that exist as like a guiding principles in there, even some of your named characters, who they are, the context of them in the world, and then all of the rules for all of that aforementioned stuff. If you read it all, you will have a fairly good understanding of a faction. And most of the time, if you want to play an army, they're almost a mandatory purchase.
Yes.
That's another thing that is worth noting if you are new and you aren't used to these things.
Yes.
There are some books like supplements that John mentioned that come out in between with like little extra bonus rules. A lot of the time you don't have to touch those. But the Codex is different. And then we've got stuff we want to see change, but I think it is important to first talk about how we feel about how things have been historically. Because, like, we don't want to come on here and just rant. One, I don't feel it's productive. Two, like,
No.
God, I'm not sitting in my truck to do it. So, like, how can I really form a proper rant video?
True. Neither of us have trucks. Like, so we'd have to go buy a truck. And then we also have to yell in it.
Well, John, I would love to buy a truck, but they're making them too damn big to be sensible now. Like,
that's true.
Can we just talk about for a minute how they said they were bringing back the Ford Ranger, and
we cannot go on the truck ranchers. we will be here for 3 hours. We both have a lot of things to say about the Ford Ranger.
All I'm saying is that shit could have been cool, and it wasn't. But we don't want to do that. Like, it's not our style. But I think also it is not our style to ignore issues and feelings that we have about the existing codexes and how they have been. And then that will springboard us into why we maybe like the changes that we're going to propose later. Otherwise you just won't really understand.
Yeah, and I think you really got to start off with one of the things about codexes that seems to be the sore point for everybody is a mixture of codex creep and inconsistency in the quality of the codexes across an edition. Mm-hmm. Those are kind of in the same category because they're the same thing. A lot of people conflate the codex creep as in every codex that's progressively stronger. It's not really a thing. It's just that each of the best codexes comes out makes it feel that way.
Yeah.
Because normally as more rules come out, things get toned down because they now have counters.
Mm-hmm.
And it's notoriously more of a problem in a edition like 9th edition, where they didn't, everything started off on the even playing field, on 10th, where everything has indexes starting on an even playing field. But to compare it to 8th edition, the problem was that everyone had indexes in 8th edition, and then one faction got a codex and was really good for 3 months. And then another faction got a codex and was really good for 3 months. And then yada, yada, yada. And people are scared we're going to go back to that. But I think a good example of what could happen and what is the preferable solution is what's happening in AOS, where that is not the case. And instead, most of these books are coming out within the same power level at a 5, between a 4 and a 6 of they're all roughly playable with one another. And it does lean towards less explosive talking on the internet about it, so you don't see it talked about a ton.
Yeah.
But it's a good situation to be in when you have 4 books come out and they can all be played against each other relatively balanced.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that really from the jump is something I think we both want to see get improve, is less creep of power.
Yeah.
And keep it reasonable.
I think it has to.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's going to be painful. But, AOS is a great example. They are capable of doing it. They have in other games. They're getting better and better at this. It's just, I don't know what teams are working on those AOS codexes that feel so good versus 40k codexes. And, are they the same team or are they different rules teams? I don't know how the pudding's made to really say. Just, it would be nice. Also, one of the things that I like about the codexes will lead into something I would like changed is, generally speaking, I do think codexes are great for new players as a touch point for a faction. I remember when I first got into Warhammer, I read the codexes and was just, enthralled by them because I knew nothing. So, everything in there was brand spanking new. And very quickly, I started to understand the faction, and then I could jump off into the novels or YouTube videos or wherever else you want to go. But I understood everything I needed to know out of that codex, and that's incredible. That's really good. It's a huge mark in the win column for codexes. But once you're an established player, though, something that I would like to see changed is that buying the next iteration of a codex, the value goes down significantly.
Yes.
In theory, when you buy the codex from like I'll use Age of Sigmar for example. Like when you bought the Sylvaneth Codex for second edition, the fluff was what it was, and it covered all the fluff up to that point. And then when you bought the third edition Sylvaneth Codex, you should get new fluff in there about what's happening new in the world. That fluff equates to about a page. Maybe. Maybe. In 40K, it feels less for some of these changes. And when all you're getting in these sum of new fluff and interesting tidbits about your army is a page or less, that codex doesn't feel very much value for its $60 price point.
And yeah, then you're paying $60 for rules that, like, let's be honest, you're probably going to try to find somewhere else instead of spending the $60 if you can.
Yeah, that's right.
And when the vast majority of your player base is wanting to do that and talks actively about wanting to do that, it's probably because you have a bad pricing model for your game.
Like, I don't think they would ever bring that price down, but what I would at least make it feel worth it for the existing players. So when you go into a new edition or you go from one to the next, try to add substantial fluff in there so that you're actually interested in reading it for new players. Or
and I would
existing players.
And I would venture to say that a good solution to this, right, is most people I think that play this game aren't like us that have like 5 factions. Mm-hmm. They are people who play 1, maybe 2 factions. And the first faction they play, they're probably going to buy the Codex for every time. And I think that they want to keep pushing this Warhammer Plus subscription for the army builder, for all the stuff. There needs to be some sort of like tie-in with the Codex beyond just like buy the book, put it in the app, and then pay us a subscription from the app too. Like if when you bought the Codex, it came with a period of time where you can now use the app without paying the subscription service, the value of that Codex goes up significantly. And it is much easier to get a new person in if you go, buy this book and this combat patrol box, download the app that you have this code for, and you have everything you need to play a game this Saturday. Yeah. Build your models over the week. As opposed to buy this codex, pay for the subscription, also buy the models. Something we had talked about previously is if you add up that money for one faction, playing one faction per an edition. We'll use Space Marines as an example. Say you buy the starter box, so you can get the core rulebook, so you don't have to really worry about it. Well, now you're going to calculate that in. And you're just going to pay for the subscription and for the codex. In the first year of playing, right? So say you even take the cheapest subscription route, you're spending $120 on rules alone. That's a lot of money. And the value is just not there. Though like 40K does a really good job with the codexes of like getting new people in, and it's very appealing, and reading the books is very fun. I still go back and read my codexes from years ago to get in the game. How am I like supposed to do this thing?
Yeah.
Long term. How am I supposed to pitch this to somebody? Even people who like probably are higher up on an income bracket. Like, that's a lot to ask. That's a lot of money. Like,
for the rules alone, that's not models.
Like, yeah. Like, that's the important bit. Like, that's just so that you can know what you're doing in the game.
That's to have your app and to have your book.
And compare that to like 5th edition Necrons, right? That was years ago, right? It wasn't that long ago. Right? 10 years, relatively. Like 10, 12 years ago. 5th edition Necrons book. $30. Had everything you needed to play that faction. That lasted you 5 years. Or like 3 years. Or 4 years. Or something like that. Like, the scaling up of their pricing model for rules alone, not including supplements, just core base, has gotten really high.
And it makes you view these with a more critical eye because the
Yes.
ask is bigger.
They stop being fun because you're asking us to pay the equivalent price of like a video game. Like a full ass video game. And to be honest, I don't know if the product you're giving us has the same level of like development as video game.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, the answer to that is usually no.
Yeah.
If I was new and getting into it, sure, again, Codex. But like, as an existing person, less so. And like having to have an app subscription with it if I want to stay in the GW bubble, just no thank you for me. That's just too much for rules. Because I play other games where the rules are free. Like I play a Song of Ice and Fire, Conquest, like in these, you get the app and the builder and the rules are all, you pay nothing for them. Which makes it a little difficult. And I would like to see more value proposition added or a purely digital option to keep the price low.
Yes. And that doesn't come from a place of fuck GW. I love the IP. I love the game. I want to keep playing it. I'm going to keep playing it. But I want to have more people to play with. And I keep seeing more and more people just jumping ship because they're like, it's the number one expense when it comes to hobby. And I can just go play these 6 Osprey games systems for the same price as a single rulebook.
Or they play and they get them rules from elsewhere, we'll say.
Yeah.
Elsewhere. And that's going to be an issue down the line if that continues to be the case. So I just like to see it headed off at the pass early. I think it would be real hopeful. It'd be great, especially at the start of an edition where whatever improvements they make now are going to cascade for the rest of the Codex releases. And again, every faction's going to get one. So it would be nice. Another big thing I would really like to see is one of the things I have enjoyed about 10th is that it's been simple, relatively speaking. The detachments, not a lot there for most of them. You get an army
in a good
rule,
way.
In a great way. Like, that's not a downer. That's awesome. There's not a lot of over-encumbered, overloaded rules in them. The detachments are straightforward. They're simple to understand. And it lets you get into the game quickly and have your stratagems and your enhancements, you're ready to go. For new codexes, there's going to be a temptation or an opportunity to take some of those detachments and crank up the complexity, not only power, which John mentioned, but complexity. I hope that they resist that temptation. You
or
can
if they have to fall in.
Oh, go ahead.
Or if you have to fall into that temptation, that they do it in a smarter way. Like, look at the Tyranids detachment, where like you have 3 unique rules, but you don't get all 3 at the same time. You pick one at the beginning of the game, and that's just your rule. Or like Black Templars the same way. They have like 5 oaths or vows to choose. You pick one. Like, I think that's a level of complexity that's like the top end of like, read these 5 things, learn them, and then pick one in each game. Compared to like the Orcs, which is just like, what do? You monster truck. Like, it's a single, it's like 2, I think it's 2 sentences.
Yep. You get sustained hits 1.
In melee, I think.
Yeah, in melee. That's it. Every orc thing, sustained hits 1. Cool. I love it.
Easy.
Yeah, instead of going complexity up, I would really like to see them just give you a lot of options in detachments. I mean, in terms of play style. So, like, maybe you have a detachment. I'll use orcs, for example, because they're working. Like, maybe you have the Wa detachment or the Stompa tribe detachment where you get sustained hit 1 in melee. Cool. Maybe you get one where you get a sort of like sustained hits in shooting. Or maybe your Wa bonuses apply to your shooting attacks. Cool. Maybe you get a Speed Freaks one, where now it gives you bonuses for all of your vehicles in the entire army. Cool. Maybe you get one for Blood Axes, where you get like crazy deep strike rules for your Blood Axe units. So you could do like spec ops nonsense. Cool. There, you're not increasing complexity across all of them. your opening playstyle options for people who own the Codex. So you can play your army in interesting new ways that will keep you playing through the book for a long time because you got a lot of choices in terms of like what your overarching strategy is. But it's not going to overload your brain with all sorts of stuff like happened in ninth edition. And I would love to just see that executed well.
Yeah, I think if they stick to the promise of 2 pages of rules, of like army, detachment, stratagem all combined as 2 pages, we'll get that.
Yeah, and it's perfect. And you could just change your 2 pages per detachment, depending on which one you pick.
And like that alone provides more value to codexes. To kind of piggyback off the thing we said previously, is if you pull the book out and you go, here's all the data sheets, and there's 8 detachments in here, and they're all relatively simple, but they each are a different, unique way of playing the game. Well, now I know that at least I have 8 unique times I can play an army.
Yeah.
Not to mention all the different variations within there, like, which solves like the problem that I want to bring up that I would like them to address, and that is internal balance. A lot of the indexes have very monotone ways of playing when you're playing at a higher end. Like when you go play like lower end of like just kind of playing whatever with your buds, there's a lot more you can do. But as soon as people start tooling some stuff up and refining your lists over the course of a couple of games, you kind of run into this repeating situation of like, oh, well, I'm going to take this unit at least twice. I'm going to take this unit at least twice. I'm going to take these enhancements, and I'm going to take these weapon loadouts. And that's my army, and that's how I play. A good example is Chaos Demons. Seth played a couple of games against his Chaos Demons. You have to take Be'lakor in that faction because the ability he gives keeps the faction alive in a mostly shooting faction. But it feels bad to play against, and therefore he kind of feels weird playing the faction unless he's playing against certain armies. Because there's only one way to play it. There's no way to like move it around to play games with other people that doesn't just screw over. Which is tied into the other problem, which is there's a lot of, let's say, rock, paper, scissors going on, which there's always going to be some. But when you've got some factions that cannot interact with another faction, or another faction, your faction might have a rule that negates any sort of response from your opponent, you're going to have win rates where, like, against one faction, you're doing like a 20% loss or win rate, and then other factions, you have like an 80%. Like that disparity is nuts. And it leads to bad times in a more casual competitive scene where you've got one guy who might have one army, and that one army might counter his other buddy that he plays with every week. And now what, is the other person just go buy another $600 army?
I mean, I wouldn't.
Exactly. You'll just put the game down until you get the Codex.
Which is what normally happens, which is just a shame. Yeah, I would really like to see internal balance fixed myself. Like, or again, orcs, for example, because it's just, we'll keep it running. There are a ton of options in that index. So many data sheets. Like, you can go pull it up. There's an insane amount of orc units because they've been an army that's been out forever. A lot of
They're also fun as fuck.
They are. They're great. They're really fun. And I want to use a lot of the stuff in, like, the fluff, in theory, when I, like, picture stuff. But mechanically, like, external balance, as in, like, oh, my army only has a 43% win rate, or, like, you know, whatever discussion in competitive metas.
It's not really productive. Like,
there's a place, but I don't think it's one that I care to talk about a ton. Rather, what I'm discussing is internal balance. So that means in an index or in a codex, in a book, between all of your options in your army, how many of those options are compelling as a list choice for you? You know, how many of those do you think you're going to take regularly? Is, you know, 100% of it going to be compelling? Is 90% of it compelling? 75% of it compelling? 50% of it compelling? 25% compelling? Those numbers vary from book to book because sometimes the units they put in there are tuned in various ways that don't exactly work. And that's internal balance. And I find that there are a number of factions that have internal balance issues. Space Marines is a great example. Orcs is a great example, where there are a lot of options in the book. But I'm finding that as I'm trying to like build lists and tinker, a lot of them I don't really see a use for.
Yeah.
Or I don't find interesting. I mean, like maybe half, give or take, seems cool. That like I could see, okay, I could do something with that. Others just feel off. And that's a shame because I want to bring them. Like rocket launch, what is it? Tank busters.
Tank
Sorry,
busters.
they have
Tank busters.
rocket launches as a weapon. Well, some of them do, because the loadout's odd. But like tank busters, the idea is that they're supposed to be like the orcs obsessed with killing tanks, right? Like it is their day in, their day out. They cannot help themselves but kill tanks. But their weapons are all lower strength than tank, which is a little odd. They've got like the anti-keyword on the melee weapon, but like you're a rocket launcher group. Like, why am I getting in there with a hammer? And the points don't work. So like you look at it and very quickly go, oh, well, I really can't find a use for that in my list, so I guess I won't take it. And that turns off a lot of your book. And when that happens, you lose options. And that's all separate from external balance, which is a whole other thing. But you lose options, and you lose the gumption to play that index and to go deep. And I also think that's a shame.
I think a lot of the external balance problems kind of naturally get solved when the internal balance is reined in to be more appropriate. Because having more options means you can respond to more things outside of what you are dealing with.
Yep.
And a lot of times, like, it just makes the game more fun. Like, having more options of stuff to choose from and to pick means you are less likely to just break 3 of whatever's the best thing. Like, you're more likely to bring pocket picks of like 1 here. You're going to take like a core of these like really good units. You're going to take 2 of here. It'll be much better. I think the indexes have done a better job of the 9th edition for like making the game less complex, but something that they've done worse than 9th edition is there's a lot less internal balance between a lot of these factions that we saw previously. And that internal balance was handled by different knobs previously. And before, stratagems was one of them. That's less of one now, right? We don't really use stratagems as a knob. Most of what's happening in the indexes is points. A lot of the points need to be changed because they just don't make sense for a lot of things. But they can't just crank them down because then some of them become too good. Like Casterkin and Guard. Good example. 120 points is a lot to ask for them, but if you made them like 80 points, why would you ever bring normal guardsmen? So what point value makes sense there? But it leads me into the thing I don't want to see change in the codexes, is I don't want to see a ton of datasheet changes. I think a lot of what can be solved with this internally balance-wise is detachment, like carrot instead of stick, and points changes. There's a couple of datasheets that need like significant reworks, but maybe just a few with tweaks. A lot of them are just good. And the less we change these datasheets, the less this codex creep will seemingly affect things. Generally, codex is going wide instead of going tall. Power-wise is just better design for longevity in the edition.
Yeah, and it also makes going from index to codex and that transition feel less jarring for people. Because, most of the stuff they know and have used feels the same as, last week. But
they might just change maybe 500 points of their army up instead of like, oh, I have to hold right and build and create a whole new list.
Top to bottom, everything's out the window. Everything is remade. Yeah, I think there's an opportunity to like leave the stuff that's working alone. It feels good. Like my beast nagas, for example. They feel great. You don't need to necessarily change anything. Don't feel compelled to have to. And then that makes it feel less jarring. But 2, it also means less man hours on making the codexes. So you could spend that time on the tank bustas and other units equivalent that need a little help. So you're just using your work hours more effectively, I think, which from a project perspective probably helps them. And I hope that they have taken that stance internally, and I guess we'll see here in a couple of weeks comparatively. I mean, like, I think literally we're getting the first codexes in a month.
Yeah. Tyranids and Space Marines, they'll be coming.
Which is why we wanted to talk about this now, because there are some things we want to change and some stuff we do not want to change. And we wanted to get this out before the codexes came out, because we might have to revisit it to see what the trends are. Because these are changes that we would like or want to avoid. But they might do some stuff that we didn't even guess at.
It could be better. It could be worse. We don't know.
Yeah, they're really trying to drive at a different angle here, and I'm interested to see how it goes. I'm
hoping it's a good one.
I do. I really do. Like, I hope that they make the codexes more accessible for people. If that's a digital option that is much cheaper than the physical, cool. If in some way to keep people able to play the game and avoid making it feel bad. Like, I think that'd be great. Because I am deeply enjoying the Core of 10th.
Yeah.
I'm really having a good time over here, and I'd like to keep it going. And to bring other people in as much as is possible.
Yeah, I really enjoy 10th edition. I think this has a huge potential to be like a better... We used to call the 8th edition the golden age or renaissance period for Warhammer. I think this is even more so. Like,
there is potential
really
here
good.
if we do not duff it up.
Yeah.
And I don't know, in AOS, they seem like they've learned a lot. I hope they implement it here. And codexes are ever present, which means it's worth talking about them. Because when they're great, oh buddy, does the game feel it. And when they're not, does the game feel it. And if you're a new player, I just want to prep you and give you some context so that you don't think the world is falling if it's terrible. And you understand how we got there if it does come out and they all feel great. So you can understand sort of the history of it and be up to speed with everyone else. Especially with all of the new player comments in the comment sections. I don't know. I think it's worth going back to basics from time to time to kind of like talk people through things that a lot of folks just take for granted as tribal knowledge. And there's probably a lot of topics like that that we just aren't noticing because we've been here a minute. And if that's the case, please send them to us. If there's stuff that we have touched on or mentioned and you're a newer player and you have no idea what the hell they are and you would like them explained, send them our way. We love getting topics from the community, and we are currently working on doing some video topics for short form content again, because everyone liked the 15-20 minute faction focuses. So if you've got stuff you want for a more that length rather than the podcast, we'll take those too. You can send them over in the comments below or in Instagram, or
we have an email down there. We've got they're calling it X, but I'm still gonna call it Twitter. We got Twitter.
That's why I paused. Like, is it Xter now? I'm an old
Xter. It's X.
It's
you can message us at critically acclaimed movie XXX.
Yes, I also want to snowboard down a mountain ahead of an avalanche. That was a cool scene, John. Don't you shake your head at me. We listened to Nickelback while playing Orcs last night. You cannot shake your head at me.
I can, and I will. And I'll do that again. We will, look at this photo orc or whatever.
And we will be trying our best to get the other videos out, but we are looking to gently shift to a potentially once a week release schedule. Every other week a podcast, every other week video. We got to try to do that gently so we can work out the kinks. But we think we are going to start with lore focus videos first. Because to be honest, it's just what I want to talk about. It's selfish. It's purely selfish.
DoorDash.
Orc DoorDash. I have words. I have thoughts. And for now, that's Bonafide Kentucky Fried. I'll see y'all on the next one.